Alex Pereira, and Israel Adesanya. Fans of the UFC have seen a number of famous rivalries develop over time, whether it's the famous Chael Sonnen Anderson Silva rivalry or the well-known rivalry between Conor McGregor and Khabib the Eagle Nurmagomedov. The grudges that have emerged out of these conflicts have frequently resulted in huge fights. Even though there have been many notable disputes in the UFC, the Adesanya-Pereira rivalry stands apart from the rest in a variety of ways. This conflict dates back to when they were both kickboxers. There aren't many rivalries in the business that began with a different sport or promotion and persisted all the way to the UFC. Eager to know more? Well, stay tuned to the end of the video. With that being said, let's get started. A conversation with Israel Adesanya was conducted by Sports News Australia. Adesanya was questioned on that video regarding his knockout defeat to Alex Pereira in kickboxing 2017. Adesanya was regarded to be among the top pound-per-pound MMA competitors in the world at the time of the interview, and had previously held the interim middleweight title for about a year. Adesanya was glib about his thoughts on the loss and his old opponent, pointing out that Pereira tweeted about him on social media following all of Adesanya's UFC triumphs. "I've never ever watched any of his fights, ever," Adesanya told the Sporting News Australia back then. "At the end of the day, no one knows who the F he is, and he's gonna be that guy when I'm world champion. And when I'm a legend, he's going to be at some pub talking S about, 'I beat that guy one time.'" From Sao Paulo, Brazil, 7,000 miles away, Pereira paid attention as Adesanya spoke those words, and they sparked something within him. After 7 months, Pereira began making the switch from kickboxing to MMA by signing a contract with Legacy Fighting Alliance, LFA. After only one LFA fight, which ended in a brutal first-round knockout, the UFC signed Pereira. Almost exactly 1 year after his UFC debut, Pereira faced a well-known opponent, Adesanya, in the Octagon. In the main event of UFC 281 at Madison Square Garden in New York, Adesanya tried defending his UFC middleweight title against Pereira, the opponent who had twice defeated him in kickboxing and given him his lone knockout loss. Adesanya described it as a beautiful arc, a chance to defeat the opponent who served as a kickboxing boogeyman. Since the interview, Pereira has had Adesanya in his sights. According to former Glory Kickboxing CEO John Franklin, this could be Adesanya's most humiliating loss. "I never forgot any word that he said," Pereira told ESPN through an interpreter. "I used that motivation to climb all the way up here for this. I'm like a stone in his shoe." Adesanya and Pereira engaged in combat for the first time on April 2nd, 2016, as a part of the Glory of Heroes kickboxing tournament in China. Before the match with Pereira, Adesanya had won 18 straight fights in kickboxing and MMA. One of the top middleweight kickboxers in the world, he was already well known. Pereira was still working to establish himself as a professional athlete. He had only competed in 15 kickboxing battles overall, and up until that time, he had lost against every other great fighter in his category. Pereira won a closely contested unanimous decision over Adesanya. Adesanya argues that instead of Pereira, he should have won the fight based on the appearance of both combatants' faces following the contest, with Pereira seeming more battered. Pereira didn't advance despite the victory. In the subsequent 2 fights, he went 0-2, while Adesanya went 7-0, including a victory over Yursi Bulgari.
Israel Adesanya!
Adesanya lost the Glory Championship against Jason Wilness in a very tight, unanimous vote. Another heartbreaking decision that Adesanya believed that he won ended in defeat. And when he faced Pereira in the next match, memories of which persisted in his mind, Pereira was thoroughly outclassed by Adesanya for 2 rounds as he moved in and out and pieced Pereira together. Learning from his faults and from his first fight, Adesanya was landing powerful combos and unleashing right hand after right hand, most of which found their target, Pereira's skull. At one point, the referee intervened to declare a standing knockdown, which Adesanya subsequently disputed since he was about to finish. Pereira eventually managed to escape the assault and reach the bell. In the third round, Pereira increased the pressure by taking Adesanya down and striking him with heavy blows and powerful kicks. Finally, Adesanya dodged a right kick and delivered a back kick of his own. Pereira deflected it, advanced and unleashed a right and left hook combo. It was too late for Adesanya to defend with his right hand. Adesanya was forced to the canvas, even more forcefully after Pereira's strong punch. Adesanya then suffered his first knockout, and the bout was over. Later, to advertise his impending match with Adesanya at UFC 234, Anderson Silva stood up on the platform set up at his Los Angeles gym. The former UFC middleweight champion Silva had just finished a workout in front of the assembled media on January 22, 2019. Silva's right on the dais where Pereira, who was also available to address queries due to Pereira's experience playing against Adesanya. Silva's team invited Pereira to join his training camp a month earlier. Silva traveled with Pereira as well to Melbourne, Australia, where on February 10, 2019, Adesanya decisively defeated Silva. Since the kickboxing knockout, Pereira had not been on Adesanya's radar prior to this. "I thought Anderson was trying to psych me out," Adesanya said. The Pereira was distinct from the Adesanya opponent of 2017. Pereira won 10 of his next 11 kickboxing matches after the Adesanya knockout, claiming the Glory middleweight and light heavyweight belts. From 2017 and 2021, Pereira defeated Marcus twice to win the Glory middleweight title. During that time, he also knocked out 7 rivals. The same cannot be said of Adesanya. He was a rising star in MMA and on track to becoming the UFC's top middleweight fighter. Adesanya won over Kelvin Gastelum to win the interim middleweight title in the UFC 2 months after defeating Anderson Silva. On October 6, 2019, at UFC 243, Adesanya knocked out Robert Whittaker to win the undisputed title. By that time, Pereira was a distant memory. Prior to the Romero fight, Adesanya told Sports News Australia that he hardly really remembers saying those things about Pereira, but in Sao Paulo, Pereira's memory of those remarks were there. He relocated to Connecticut that summer to join the squad of legendary UFC light heavyweight Glover Teixeira. In his LFA debut on November 2020, Pereira used one powerful right hand to put Thomas Powell to sleep. At that moment, Adesanya hadn't paid much attention to Pereira. Nonetheless, Pereira had to play his part, which he did. In March, he defeated Bruno Silva by a unanimous vote. At UFC 276, he then faced challenger Sean Strickland in a featured match. He punched Strickland repeatedly until he was knocked out at 236 in the first round. The stage was created when Adesanya decisively defeated Cannonier. With 12 consecutive middleweight victories and 5 title defenses, Adesanya had distinguished himself in the UFC as one of the top pound-for-pound competitors on the planet. Pereira is currently obstructing him for the 3rd time. Adesanya got off to a solid start once again this time. Towards the conclusion of the first round, after wobbling poatan with a sharp, straight right and left hook, he had also come dangerously near to realizing his unmet desire of defeating him, but Pereira was spared by the bell. That immediately announced the round's conclusion. But in the final rounds of the fight, the Brazilian began to show off his skills. He ended Israel's hope of beating him by defeating the former UFC middleweight champion via standing knockout in the final round. With this triumph, poatan also stole Israel's UFC middleweight title. Israel has acknowledged that after suffering 3 defeats against Pereira, he doesn't think of quitting up. He further admitted that he intended to keep fighting Pereira until he was victorious. The UFC's leadership was persuaded by Adesanya's performance at UFC 281 that he merits a rematch. As a result, the last style bender was given yet another chance to reclaim his misplaced UFC middleweight title and exact revenge on poatan in the UFC 287 event slated for April 9th, 2023. Many would concur that Adesanya currently has nothing to lose. He had lost a great deal to Pereira, including his UFC reputation. It might inspire Israel to let loose and give a performance of a lifetime, but it's certain that his supporters will be eager to see the UFC middleweight title around his waist. So guys, that's pretty much of it. Do you too want the last stylebender to retake the middleweight title in the UFC? Let us know in the comments below. We will see you next time. Till then, take care.